Hi, this is my postmortem for Drink, and so let's get right to it. As far as what went wrong, the main issue I had was with the simulators on Xcode, the watch and the iPhone. Really, the only issue I had was when they were communicating with Bluetooth to each other. Sometimes it worked instantly and it worked beautifully, and then other times, for seemingly no reason, it would definitely lag for like a minute or two, or sometimes even longer. Sometimes I couldn't get them to communicate until I closed everything and restarted my computer, and so I'm not really sure what the issue was, if that's just memory on my computer or something like that, but not having the device definitely made it difficult, not being able to test on a real device. And the other issue was, as always, documentation. The documentation for watches is pretty sparse to begin with, and then a lot of it has even changed recently, especially like the notifications. That framework seems completely different relatively recently. I wasn't able to find like a good example. Like from the documentation, you can see all the pieces, but it's really hard, at least for me, just from documentation, to figure out how you're supposed to put them together. And so I wasn't really able to find a good example anywhere, and I never really got them to work the way I wanted them to. And then Firebase documentation also, it wasn't too bad, but I ended up not using Google's own documentation. I actually used a Ray Wenderlich tutorial. That was a lot better, because the very first thing, the first single command I tried to type from Google's documentation didn't work. The name had changed, and there was no easy way to see it. It wasn't until I Googled it, and then I think I found it on Stack Overflow. Just the class name changed a little bit, but it wasn't changed in their documentation. As far as what went right, well, I think I made it through and passed everything, which is definitely my main goal. But some things were easier than I expected them to be, like user authentication in Firebase. That was a lot simpler, and it did a decent amount of work automatically for you. Same thing when setting values in Firebase. That ended up being a little bit easier than I thought it was going to be when I was first like digging through the JSON and seeing how it works. What did I learn? Like I said, I've never had an Apple Watch. I've actually never even really used an Apple Watch before, so I didn't know the first thing about them. I didn't know that they were companion apps for phones. I didn't realize that the phone did the majority of the work. I never really thought about it much before, but all of that was new to me, and I never used Firebase before either. And going into it, I'm pretty comfortable with SQL databases, and I expected it to be a SQL database. And when I saw that it was just one big giant JSON object, I was definitely really surprised, and it was really puzzling to me how it was even supposed to work at first. As far as what would I have done differently, I can't really think of much. Maybe not use Firebase, because, like I said, I'm a lot more comfortable. Like if I just either save to core data or just use like an online SQL database that I could build, I think that would have been easier for me. And then I could have done more features to make the app a lot more polished. Whereas I really kept the app super basic, and like 90% of my work was all just on the back end stuff, and communicating between the watch and the phone. And going into it, I knew it was going to be a really tough month, so I didn't want to completely screw myself and bite off way more than I could chew, because I had heard from other students that this was like the biggest workload of the program. And it definitely was. It was a lot of stuff for me. But ultimately, I'm glad that I actually did learn Firebase, because I know it's super popular. I knew it was something I was going to have to learn eventually anyway, even though I like SQL. I think Firebase is so ubiquitous. If I didn't learn how to do it, I'd sort of be cheating myself and taking the easy way out. Yep, so that's it. It was a great month. I definitely learned a ton, and I appreciate all your feedback and helping me on Slack. Thanks.